Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this session in this late evening of the fourth day of the Degrowth conference in Vienna, under quotation marks. Before I really start with the session, I would have like to raise three administrative issues. The first one being there is simultaneous translation of this session. You have the link in the chat. And in the chat, you can also post questions for us or for the panelists, basically. And we will then choose some of them, not all of them, and they will be posted to the panelists. Tom, who is our IT helper, who I'm introduce afterwards, Tom Nena, he's going to help us select these questions. And the third part is that there is polls, so watch out for them. During the course of this session, there will be polls, as you probably already know from other sessions, and you can vote. Yes, so yeah, as I said, I wanted to use this opportunity also quickly to introduce our IT supporter and who helped us also greatly in preparing the session, Thomas Nyer. Maybe you can quickly show your face. Thanks very much, Thomas. Okay, so welcome again. So to this very last session of the Degrowth Vienna conference, of course, the geographical reference now is only relevant anymore now, according to the base of the organizing team, which met in Vienna for preparing this conference, which initially was set out to be a face-to-face conference, but we all know what then happened with Corona and so forth. My name is Kerschner. I'm assistant professor at Modul University Vienna and Masaryk University Brno in the Czech Republic, and I'm also active member of Research and Degrowth. Now, the conference organizers have kindly asked me to moderate this very last session, which, to be honest, I found very brave because I've got no experience in moderation, but I accepted that invitation, and I will try to do my best. So, okay, wow, what an experience, this conference. As I said, it was planned out as a local conference, rather a small event, a specialized events. I remember when we first talked about the participant numbers, I was a member of the advisory board, not of the organizing team. Then there were numbers like 300 participants or something. Of course, that had to be changed afterwards. But what do we have now? Quite an amazing result, which is over 4,000 participants, like 300 speakers, 100 sessions, 100 or more volunteers, and a highly international event with lots of participation from a lot of people and a lot of engagement. So really amazing. So all this was possible because of the hard work and care of the organizing team of about 35 or more people, really young, motivated people and really engaged. No money and no wage was paying off all these efforts. Everyone who I talked to about the conference was really amazed and really surprised what had been put together in this very short time after we had the news about COVID-19 and what it would imply. I have to say myself, I was also a bit skeptical when there was this change from a physical face-to-face conference to an online conference, whether it would work, whether people would be interested, who would participate in something like this. But what we've seen was really astounding, and really everyone was impressed. This team, the organization team I mentioned, was supported additionally by an awareness team, which helped to reduce discrimination or disrespectful behavior. There was also a harvesting team who asked critical questions to us and provides the graphical recordings for all the big panels. By the way, I think I didn't mention the graphical recording at the beginning. You will also find it at the end of the session. We had translations also at this conference in German and English. So that was also really great for all the big sessions this happened. And in addition, yeah, of course, a very engaged organizing team. I was really surprised myself how quickly they reacted to everything that you would ask them, and someone popped up somewhere and helped you out. Now coming to this panel and the goals of it. So with all that happened over those 4 days, our goal now here is to bring this somehow together, to conclude over it, to discuss it, to reflect critically about it. Yeah, what a challenge. And not only that, we also want to look forward. So what's going to happen next? What will happen next? Or what should happen next? Luckily, I have, I'm not alone in this. The main part in this panel, of course, is the panelists. And so I have 4 wonderful panelists here. Very excited also to see a male only, or a female, all-female panel, which is of course is really nice to see when there's so many all-male panels out there for which you can still vote when you find one. There's this nomination for congratulations, you had an all-male panel. So fantastic. I would like to welcome the panelists now. We'll just mention their names briefly, and then introduce them later in more detail. So we have Tony Naushin. Who can say Tony? If you just maybe say hello. And then Nena Troy, Viviana Asada, and Haliki Kreinin. Yes, I will come to each of you separately. Now we start or now more about the procedure of this panel that was also designed by the organizers in a really good way. Is the first block is about a reflection of about the conference from each of you, and the second block is about moving forward, as I mentioned. So that is about what impact will the conference have, what does it mean putting the how on the strategy, putting the how on the agenda and moving maybe away from the what. And then also the question of Corona and the post-Corona era for degrowth, what does it mean? And then at the end, we have questions from the audience. Yeah? So we have time to answer some questions. With this, I would already come to the first question. It will be directed to Tony. So the question is, so for this first block is, after these 4 days and what you've seen in these 4 days, the sessions you've visited, your impressions, what are your lessons learned? Or yeah, tell us also about which sessions you went to. That would be also interesting. What you have learned from it. What was your individual highlight? What was maybe not so nice? What points of critique do you have? Or what other things you missed? Something you would have liked to go. Of course, there was such a huge offer that it was difficult to see everything. And all this, I would like to you to stick, if you can, to just 5 minutes. So that would be really great, Tony. So you wrote to me that in your research you focus on fossil finance, and you are with the German NGO. So you're also involved in the German climate movement since 2018. You say you're an activist from high school age, which is very interesting. You have 6 years of experience working in NGOs like 350.org and so on. You have a background in economics, as far as I saw in your biography. And yes, so with all this, what is your impression of the conference? What was your main take-home messages and so on, regarding to the questions before? And maybe also very quickly, if you can say, what is fossil finance? Over to you, Tony. You need to unmute your microphone.
Oh, I thought I did. Is it better? Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, okay. You asked the questions you asked. I could write probably a book and I will try to stay focused, and I have to remind myself all the questions that I should answer.
Just pick whatever you
Yes, I
feel
can
most
start
relevant.
with the reflection, maybe. This was, I mean, of course, to begin with, I think I must say this was kind of making best out of a difficult situation, this conference, how it was turned and the way it was made online. And of course, for the last 2 months, having like doing so many online meetings, I thought I had my share of online meetings, and I was really skeptic how I was already like, even though I was really excited before when it went online to attend to this. So I think first thing I would say is it was really amazing how well it was adapted in an online version, and it really could, at least for me, I found the thoughts that went to it and really doing with all the groups and theater. And so I think generally I must say to the organizers that it was really, really cool the way the whole thing was adapted online. And it could really create, at least from my memories of the other, the last conference, of course, you always have this reference point and you kind of try to go back. I think one good thing was meeting different people or friends from the past and stumbling upon them on different sessions, or kind of having this feeling of still finding the feeling of community. I think that was really cool. And then another point that I must say from the 2018's conference, especially the Malmo one, I mean, I've already said that with other friends in a smaller circle, that at least for me and some, when we discussed it at that point, when we left the Malmo conference, we all had this very, like a sinking feeling. It was really like you're there and you're waiting to see a destruction unfold in front of your eyes and still feeling like not being able to do enough. And I think that has drastically changed in this 2 year. I mean, of course, because of this whole movement that started, but I think for me, I feel in terms of the spirit of this conference, it's a different tone. It's a much different, much more also focused in terms of the whole sessions, the way it was planned. The discussions are, so we are really talking about strategies. And when we're doing it, it's more, we are really all kind of thinking. So it's not as much academic or far away, so alternative, of course, but this time it felt we are still the alternatives that are really trying to change the reality, and the discussions had that spirit in it. I think that was also super inspiring for me also personally, that to feel this shift. And it's also over this last 3 years, 3 days from these different sessions that I felt. And one thing, then the third point I want to say is I feel also the other critique, or generally also in the past, was even though we talked a lot about being aware of the whole colonial continuity and embedding or bringing in, giving space to alternatives, I think this time we did much better job in terms of accepting the legacies. Like I remember in the opening panel, like the opening panel was amazing, and the discussions that came up. And one of the things I think that was really nice also from Broto Roy's presentation and also Ulrich Brand's presentation, there was this emphasis on accepting the different context and realities. So in Mexico conference once in 2018 as well, like I had this feeling that the discussion, sometimes we had this tendency to even romanticize this indigenous way of living, or kind of when we talk about alternatives, but sometimes it was not completely sometimes honest that while we have this lifestyle that is very imperial, and we talk about degrowth, but at the same time we say, oh, that's really nice, or so it was not completely sometimes honest or connecting with this reality or grounded. And this time I felt at least much more also with the presence of Isaac Asume, the opening panel, and how he brought this ground reality of the community struggles, this extractive front lines. So I think this time we have done much better in terms of linking, really bringing in people on the ground on these extractive frontiers, and we also clearly spelling out that we need to work on our like decolonizing the degrowth thoughts as well, and owning up. I think these were really for me how to say, like made me happy, or it was cool, like to see that I feel that this is really good, and this is kind of probably, of course, the direction we should be going. And this is all, I give the example of the opening session, but I also felt in the this money and that, like degrowth meets that talk, there I also felt there was this lens. So I think we have done much better job in terms of trying to incorporate global north-south dynamics and bringing it together this time. Then the last times, that was my feeling. How many times do I have left?
Almost gone.
Almost gone. Okay. Then I answer you what is fossil finance later. And okay, I still have some things, but later.
Christian, you're muted.
Sorry. So this is really good news, of course, to hear that often in the past criticism that the degrowth movement received was the non-inclusion of other parts of the world, of the global south and so on. So that's really cool. Nena, now that the question is directed to you, you studied political sciences, economics and law. So quite an explosive combination, I would say. You're the co-founder of the Konzeptwerk, which of course was one of the organizers of the Leipzig conference, the famous Leipzig conference with 3,000 participants. I think we beat that with this conference, but of course you cannot compare. So now you're also the organizer of the Zukunft für alle conference. I'm sure someone can paste the link in the chat. It happens this August, and of course also online. You say you like organizing big events. That sounds also quite a strong statement. And many people would say the opposite probably. You've just finished a book, Degrowth in Movements, with other co-authors. You are organizer of the Degrowth Summer School, member of the support group in degrowth.info. So hardly any degrowth activity, I would say, where you're not involved, really. So my first question would be how you find time for all of this. But of course, also we are very interested in your verdict on the conference, since you are kind of a specialist in organizing conferences. And you are, if somebody here can really say criticisms, then it is you and Tony, who are less involved, of course. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Christian. And yeah, I first would like to thank very much and also congratulations to the organizer from my side. I think it took a lot of courage and a lot of strength to turn this conference into a digital one, and meant a lot of chaotic organization and continuous adaptation to the unplans, and you did a wonderful job. So thank you very much for that. We discussed a little bit in our preparation that it's really hard to be on the closing panel on a conference which is not live, because you cannot just walk around the conference and talk to people you know and you just met and you don't know how they find it and kind of grasp the atmosphere. And that is really interesting, because the point where you just got compliments from Tony, I'm not quite sure on it. And so maybe we just picked so many different sessions. And I think it really depended on where you were, on how much decolonial perspectives mattered or not, for example. And since we didn't really see who was at this conference from a view perspective, I think it's very hard to find that out. Yeah, I tried to participate in many different kinds of sessions. So from opening and panel and other panels to standard sessions, workshops, and also the cultural program. And I really, really enjoyed it. I also tried to engage on Discord and find my way much more in it. And in general, I have the feeling it went very smoothly. And I mean, there were some minor hiccups. Haha, here's my lapses. But I think in general, it went very well. I have the impression that there were less interactive formats than there are normally on good educational events and at degrowth conferences. And I don't think that it's fault to anyone, but it's more meant that's just more part of the digital world. I've had that experience in many events during the past months, that it's much more easy to be sending instead of being interactive. And I know a lot of you have put a lot of effort into making events interactive, so don't want to deny that at all. But I have the feeling I was in quite some events where it was more like sending, which one here is now as well. And obviously, it doesn't make sense to switch on video for 1,000 participants or 100, but it still feels really weird to talk to the void and be in your office and talk to the computer, right? It makes it differently. And we all know this, and as Connie said, I think you made the best out of it, but still that's a downside. And I have the feeling that this discussion we always have in Degrowth conferences, we have had it since 2008, about the relationship between academia and activism, and who is at the conferences and who are those people. It was still pretty high here. I tried to skim a little bit through the introduce yourself section in Discord, and I have the feeling, I mean, I didn't go to everyone, obviously, but I have the feeling of what I saw, it's like 80% were activist scholars. So people having a background in activism or being an activist, but also having a university background, so studying or working in academia. And I think it's great that there are those people like us or you out here who combine activism and academia, but still it's a very minor part of society. And I still wonder, where are all the people who are from other strands of society? And yeah, probably I didn't meet them. It doesn't mean that this conference is only activist scholars, but I think it's mainly that. And we've been discussing here that, yeah, the conference is also a format for exactly that group of people. And I think more importantly with that is that within Degrowth, we keep on organizing different things than conferences. And we all know that. And I think a lot of people do that. So it's like engage with other groups or do other kinds of events or other kind of actions. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that conferences are a really good moment to meet and to discuss in depth, but to keep the other events alive. And it's something else also I thought about this digital conference is that we said, oh, since it's digital now, people can participate wherever they are. Well, yes, but only if the internet connection is good enough, which is not always given, especially in rural areas. And yes, if the time slot fits. I mean, there were people here presenting who were just in the middle of the night, wherever they were. And I mean, if you have an international conference and people come to the place, they might have a jet lag and it costs a lot in environmental costs, but still at least they're there on the time that's there. Yeah, so I think that's something we have to deal with. I was, for example, participating, listening to the Degrowth, the food sector panel, which was very, very nice. But there was a French peasant from the countryside, and she could hardly make her statement because her internet didn't work enough. So I think this digital conferences show also the digital divide we have within urban and rural areas. Yeah, to sum it up, so very well done. I really, really enjoyed it. And I think we have to continue on working on bringing different people together and find the right formats for that. And I think we'll dive into that a little more in the second part of the panel.
Thanks a lot, Nena. And sorry, by the way, for showing you the 5-minute sign already early. That was a misunderstanding with Thomas, who is giving me the minutes on on Discord. Okay, so next, Viviana. So Viviana and I, of course, know each other for a long time already from our times in Barcelona. Now she works in Vienna. We are still active in our R&D, and we were both part of the advisory board for the conference. Viviana is an assistant professor at the Vienna University of Economics and Business. She's a social scientist who works on the intersection of social, political, environmental issues, and she focuses on social movements. So she will definitely have a lot to say for the second part of this panel. And one could say, I guess, Viviana, you're basically a political ecologist, or mainly. And yeah, with all your knowledge from movements, coming to that question, was your impression of this conference? Did it work for you? Did the online format work for you? Do you see it as a future potential for the movement?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me to take part to this closing plenary. It is an honor for me to be here, but I also feel a big responsibility. I've also, Nena said previously. This conference was really an enriching experience, and I know I want to be able to offer a full account, of it, not a synthesis of everything that happened. Also because basically it was impossible, of course, to take part because of physical limits. It was impossible to take part to all the sessions. but also because I can only talk out of my situated experience, no? Including in terms of my own engagement with the conference organization. I'm part of the advisory board, which has been given some small support, I would say, very small support to the planning of the conference. Minuscule, I would say, as compared to the amazing work that the organizing team has devoted to this conference, no? To whom I would like to express my gratitude, my sincere gratitude. So, okay, as Christian said, this was actually the first digital Degrowth conference. And I have to say that I was one of the people that was skeptical about having it digitally, no? So as Christian might remember, and Aliki as well. But it's true, I have to recognize that it was, I think it was both successful and a needed experiment. So let me explain. First, I think it was a needed experiment because despite all the limits, no, that Nena also pointed out, of online conferences, so there is a loss of conviviality as well, which is quite important, I think, and also a loss of more in-depth debate. I think that individual online participation should be contemplated as one of the possible options in future Degrowth conferences, because it allows, of course, to avoid environmentally damaging travel. Also, there was a need to have a discussion on the current pandemic reconfiguration of the multiple crises, but even more, a discussion on the topic of strategies for a Degrowth transformation was long overdue. This was very clear for those of us who attended the 6th International Degrowth Conference in Malmo, where some heated debate sparked off in one of the final plenary discussion exactly over disagreements around the topic of the strategy of seizing state power to bring about Degrowth transformations. I think this was a successful conference because it managed to deepen the discussion on strategies with a range of diversified and on average high quality sessions. And it accomplished this in a meaningful way by involving activists and civil society representatives and other social movements and not simply academics, more, I think, than in previous Degrowth conferences. More particularly, rather than separating the academic from the activist sessions, as in previous conferences, in most of the session, I noticed that it built an engaged dialogue between these two types of profile, thus enriching discussion. No? And this allowed us also to confront with concrete struggles and realities, and in some cases, also to understand how to build some ground for potential alliances. So I think that the conference testifies also that the Degrowth movement and debate is making a further step. Up to now, it has mostly been focusing, as some also of the interventions pointed out during the conference, no? On the everyday level and on so-called now utopias and interstitial transformations, following Eric Conley Wright's term, which has been discussed on his theories have been discussed on a very interesting panel on Saturday. That is all the grassroots localized alternatives, which are certainly of utmost importance. I will come back to this later, no, in the second part. Recently, the Degrowth has started also to reflect on other types of transformation, which Eric Conley Wright called symbiotic transformations. That is, those non-reformist or radical reforms that have often been more evoked rather than really analyzed. Some very interesting discussion have taken place here in this conference, in this respect, with regards to, for example, policies at the national level on basic income, rethinking ownership in production at the international level, for example, by addressing trade agreements which blatantly conflict with environmental goals, as Olivier de Schutter reminded us for the food sector, and for some, such as Stefania Barca, by engaging also with the Green New Deal for Europe. But also at the regional local level. Here, some Degrowth innovative policies are indeed already taking place. We could hear, for example, the inter-story of Mals in South Tyrol, which managed to impose organic agriculture at the municipal level through a referendum. But these local policies are often not being supported by national policies, but are rather being fought at different levels of governance and lawmaking as well. So these power struggles are linked to the state question, which some of us have identified as an important question in Degrowth that has just been started, I think, to be tackled in this conference and in a few recent publications as well, and that conceive of the state as a social relation. And I will also come back to this later. I just wanted, if I have time, to add one final point. As one of the questions was what you would like, what was missing, no, in the conference. So My last point is not really on what was missing, but what I would like to see in an even more developed form in future conferences. I would like to see more bridging with different movements to start to build or strengthen alliances. This happened, for example, with the trade union and with environmental justice and decolonial movements in the Global South, but I think it should be strengthened. And this is important so as to avoid a superficial reading of the degrowth as well, but also in order to understand how can we frame degrowth in a way that integrates and accommodates potential allies' concerns when they are in line with the degrowth vision, of course. I'm thinking here of the debate sparked around the statement, okay, I'm done, of Florian Weniger from the Austrian Chamber of Labor, who perceives degrowth as a middle-class phenomenon, which is not attentive to redistributional issues. Here, voices from people that are potentially compatible with degrowth, although in a critical way, can also help, as we need to be self-critical about our strategies.
Wow. Thanks, Viviana. So that was really a very deep analysis of the program and the experience. So thank you very much.
I took lots of notes.
We realized. Yeah, I was what I am taking from what you say is that we seem to have managed better to bring together activists and scientists. Again, as I think you also said, agreeing with Nena here, which I think is great to hear. I hope this is also the other general notion, because usually what you for example, in Malmö, some people were complaining, "Oh, this is not a scientific conference. If it's just like a party, then call it a party." And while the others were saying, "Oh, this is only scientists. Where is the activism?" No. So criticisms from both sides, and I also remember back in Barcelona when someone wrote on the toilet door, "Science, science, science, blah blah blah, conference, conference, conference," something like this. So really nice to hear that. Haliki, coming to you last. I did leave you last, of course, because you have a lot to say about the conference. You have been there, one of the organizers from the very beginning. So I don't actually know. You will tell us when you actually started preparing all this, because I actually don't know. You are a PhD candidate, also at WU, so the University of Economics and Business in Vienna. And you are a teaching and research associate at the Ecological Economics Institute at that university. And you're also an environmental activist and a trade unionist. And you focus in your research on environmental labor issues, or environmental labor studies, you say, sustainable work, and the socio-ecological transformation, of course. So as an insider, Haliki, knowing all the hard work that was behind there, a lot of that is completely invisible to us. What were your thoughts on the conference and the questions before?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that I was involved from the start, but not as deeply as I was involved for the past couple of months, because there were many other people that started the process and the coordination. So I was involved less before the Corona crisis, and then I had a lot of time, and then I suddenly became kind of very involved. So I have to mention that. So yeah, there's that. But I think I probably have a very different view of the conference than the other panelists. As I didn't really get to listen to so many talks, I was mostly on the other side of Webinar Jam, where Tom is now, sort of manically pasting people's names into the sticky notes and so on. But here are my reflection. Yeah, so many things have already kind of been mentioned. Just a couple of things to add on. We really obviously didn't predict that it would become so global. So 2 years ago when we started, we planned a small regional conference on strategies that would be parallel to the main conference in Manchester, which actually now isn't even happening, or is being delayed for a year. So we didn't think about things, or we didn't have the resources to have, for example, Spanish translation and things like that. So if we would be organizing it again, I think we would try to make it more global in that sense. And also just in general, there were some issues like workshops being limited to a certain number and people not being able to join and so on. And there were many issues which we would probably do differently now. But regardless, we've received quite a lot of positive feedback on some things that were different because we were digital. For example, the flattened hierarchies of being able to take part in discussions, right? So the discussions weren't dominated by old white men because everyone could post their questions and women could post questions, and this was much easier to organize, right? And also the discussions were all on Discord, so the discussions didn't just happen between old white male academics themselves while having dinner, like they were open to the public and everyone could take part and read them. And this was definitely something positive that we take away in terms of removing hierarchies and power relations and so on. But of course, yeah, there were still some issues. In terms of what this conference means for the Degrowth community, we hope that the space that we created on Discord, for example, that can stay open. We're not sure if we would leave the comments on, but at least as a kind of diary of what happened and the discussions that went on. This is hopefully a great resource, as well as all the recorded materials that we will have and we will share. But at the same time, we know that a lot of people that submitted brilliant workshops and sessions couldn't go through with them on an online format. So we're aware of that, especially women who had caretaking roles and so on. We talked a lot about gender equality and gender issues, but in the end, there was also 1 or 2 sessions where the female presenter had to drop out at the last minute because of care work related things. And we ended up accidentally with 3 male presenters, but the moderator was female, so it's kind of okay-ish. But yeah, so even though we've discussed it and planned it, things still change. So we're aware that these, again, that there's wider societal structures that kind of determine how this things work out. And adding to what Nena mentioned, there was a lot of incredible work being done by the whole Orga team. So maybe about 30 to 40 really involved people. But most of us are highly educated, white, middle class students and young activists, basically. And the barrier of entry to degrowth is quite high. So most of the work was done because we have the time and the resources to do this and to put this energy into it. And of course, this is not possible for everyone, right? Especially people with caring roles again. And we are kind of reflecting on this lack of diversity also in the organizing team. And it's something that we're aware of, but I think this is something in general for the degrowth community that we think this is a problem. And I think for the sustainability of degrowth in Vienna, we also have to reflect on how we organize and where this energy and time comes from, because it was a very intense 4 days for us, for sure, and a very intense 2 months or 3 months, actually, probably an intense 2 years for many of us. And there was also burnout and stress and conflict experienced between us. Okay, so I have to give up now. But yeah, so this sustainable activism, yeah, this is something that we are still reflecting on and struggling with as well. Just, I don't know if this was visible, but it's, yeah, I think it comes with the territory kind of. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Haliki. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm sure this is something that studies of the corona situation will definitely find. We've seen something like this already happening in one study, that people with kids do experience it in a not so nice way quite often, and certainly in something like organizing a conference, this is much more difficult if you are a carer. That reminds me, actually, I have to say thank you to my wife who's putting the kids to bed on right now. And this is happens to be quite difficult at the moment. So thank you very much. So we're moving forward. The degrowth movement is supposed to move forward. We are coming to the second block which I would like to divide in 2 rounds, but we can keep it a bit more flexible. In the first round, we would discuss about your ideas of what this will mean for the degrowth movement. What will this conference and what comes out of it mean for it? What are the next steps? What are the next steps for the movement itself? What are the next steps for you and your own activities and research? And what kind of levels of actions do you see? Where should we engage? So this conference has tried to move away from a how, from the what, from what is the situation that we don't like, to what has to be done, or how can we achieve a different situation, moving to the often referred to degrowth society. That will be the first part, and the second part is about Corona, but we will come to that. I've got no specific order for the speakers in this round, so whoever comes first and would jump ahead, please do, don't be shy. Who wants the word? Thanks, Nena.
Yeah, so I've tried to follow a bit on the chat as well, and I think I find it quite interesting that a lot of people in the chat write, "Oh, it's so cool we have this digital conference," because I think one important point of degrowth, and it will be in the future, is to not only change our thinking, but touch our emotions and change our way of being. And I think that is why something that the Degrowth conferences normally do really well, that they show that you can organize differently, you can have different interactions, you can eat differently and all that. And I think we did this in some way. I mean, Halike just put wonderful examples, and I think also the communication on Degrowth on Discord was really nice. But I mean, it still stays a very non-living experience in front of the computer, right? And I think, so we should learn from here and take it forward and be like, yes, digital forms can engage more people and can make bridges, but I also think this should be an intermediary step, and we should still think about where do we actually meet and interact. That, like, combined with the discussion beforehand, and it's on the what and how we go on. So I still believe that degrowth itself as a concept and as a term is still very useful in a lot of debates, but not in all debates that I would like to have about social ecological transformation. It's still a rather negative and complicated term, and it doesn't evoke the future we want in itself, right? The degrowth, I mean, that's not what we want. We always have to explain, no, that's not what we want. What we want is another way of thinking. And so I think rather instead of going along and saying degrowth is that term, that should bring about the change we want. And we should find ways of bringing the concept of degrowth into different debates. In some case, degrowth is an opener, and I think it invites for different discussions, and people come and say, this is exactly what I was looking for. And in some places, it's not useful at all, and it rather helps to speak about the content we want to speak about. I already showed the little book we really launched this week, and I wanted to give it to many of you at the conference at our live stand, but we can't. Well, you can find the text online at degrowth.info, and order the book also if you want to. And we try to find out in this project, what do different movements think about degrowth and how do they relate to degrowth? And we've learned a lot of important lessons on what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And for example, one was the one that Tony and I were referring to earlier, and also Viviana said, is that we have to learn to to analyze the power structures and to find ways of overcoming these power structures. And we have to understand that the link of decolonialism and degrowth is a very intrinsic one and should never be forgotten. And so that means that within everything we do as part of the degrowth movement, we should always think about power structures and privileges and discrimination and try to overcome those. And that also means that we should not start making projects just on ourselves and be like, hey, we got this wonderful idea, now we carry it forward. but we should think, so who do we want to reach out to? Who should be part of our movement? Who do we think needs support or is maybe having an important struggle that we want to support? And go out to others and help them, but ask them what they would need from other groups and get in touch with others and try to create a common ideas. In Konzeptwerk and also within the climate justice movement in Germany, I think, and in other places, and I mean, as much as I understood Tony, she has the feeling this is also going on in a wider movement. There's this whole discussion going on, right, about power structure and privileges. And one of the things I definitely learned is that we should not expect that some of us in a small corner find the right strategy and then everyone else will like it, but that we should be supportive of the fight of others. And especially the ones in privileged positions should rather look out at how they can support struggles of others instead of always thinking from their way. And that means that the issues of race, class, and gender in intersectional struggles should be a center of all degrowth activities. Christian also already mentioned the conference Future for All earlier. And combining what I said earlier, this thing about, well, we want to bring degrowth to a bigger audience, but maybe not under the term degrowth, and about power structures and privileges. In Konzeptwerk, we've been working on a project called Future for All, working on utopias and transformation, and trying to inspire more people by talking about what we want. And we have a lookout at 2048. We wonder, how can a future for all look like? And then we asked ourselves, how can we get there? So that is, I think, very much related to the degrowth debate. And it's very much linked to the strategies we've discussed, but maybe it comes a little bit under another label. I'll wrap it up in a second. In order to develop this vision for 2048, we've carried out future workshops with over 200 participants last year. We're now summing up those results, and we organized this conference in Leipzig, and probably most likely, as Christian put it, Leipzig is a label, as Vienna was a label now, but digitally in August. And we hope that we can carry this discussion about the way we want to transform the world forward.
Thank you very much, Nena. Thank you all so much for being so nice with your time and keeping to the 5 minutes. It's really great. Who would like to go next? Haliki, super.
Nena always says exactly everything that I want to say. So I just wanted to add to that, and especially working together with other movements and meeting other people where they're at, even if they're not in the ivory tower of sort of perfect ecological white middle class academic behavior, and then judging them from that ivory tower. And I think that's really, really important. And of course, there's inequalities and hierarchies in the degrowth movement, and we have to kind of like reflect on that. And we are trying to do that also in our organizing team. And this is really one thing I wanted to add, one criticism kind of also what I've experienced a little bit, that reflecting back to the one session or the couple of sessions where I was there and I was able to listen, Nora Rätzel, Melanie Pichler, Marcus Wissen all talked about the importance of for example, trusting workers, that they also care about the environment and that they have knowledge and expertise in how to change systems, right? And also what to produce and how to produce other things. And that it's actually often trade union officials, for example, that are impeding radical change, right? And that we have to trust in workers. And I think the degrowth movement, or especially, older white academics need to also trust a little bit more, for example, in young activists or even young people wanting to get involved, and trust that they can organize and do things, and that they have ideas, and that they can be trusted to do things. Because the barrier to entry to degrowth is very high, as I said, and there's a lot of perfectionism. And we have, even with this conference, for example, we really tried to use open source software. It wasn't possible within 2 months to do that. And Big Blue Button was open source, Webinar Jam wasn't, Discord obviously isn't. But we know that over 80% of the people that registered for the conference use Gmail, for example, right? So we really avoided using Google ourselves, but everyone uses Google. But then you still get a lot of criticism, which also criticism is good. We need to be able to learn from criticism, but we have to be careful with how we criticize and who we criticize and from what position we criticize. And if we're criticizing young people for taking action and really tearing them down with our knowledge and expertise, I think that's not going to build a very sustainable movement, right? So I think we have to reflect on whether we want to be a movement of perfect white middle-class academic ecologists, or if we want to build on solidarity. So I totally agree with Nena that maybe we can't use degrowth in every situation. Maybe we have to use different phrases, different words, if we want a broad movement of young people, activists, workers, and trade unions, and so on, and also, yeah, other struggles and other movements. Then we have to do better, and we have to be more inclusive. And so this came out as like a big chip on my shoulder now, but it's been something that I've really been thinking about for some time, and also struggling with, personally also sometimes. So if we talk about the future and future strategies, I would just urge us to reflect on this. And I have to say really quick that there's a lot of amazing white older male professors who really helped us and who support young people. And Christian, you're young, so don't worry. You support us, and you're not included in this, but there's
I was going to inquire if you are,
but especially,
if you are apologizing to me.
Yeah, exactly. No, not. Especially a shout out to Uli Brandt, who is really brilliant, and he's someone that really empowers young people to do stuff and to decide for themselves how to change things. And there's really, really, really nice people like that out there as well. But then there's still a lot of criticism and talking down, and I think that's not always so helpful. But I understand also that people have been in this fight for much longer, and it is easy to get kind of critical and to get a bit harsh and sort of sarcastic and so on. So I can sympathize with it. But with all this in mind, I want to say some positive things as well. And I think this was a really formative experience. And strategically speaking, I think the Vienna Degrowth Society, which we now have, and the Vienna Degrowth crowd, we were going to go forward much, much stronger. And we've built up a real strong community here of really engaged people, also through fire and conflict and everything. And there's been some of that. And a really special shout out to Sweet Boy Double Economy Ren for all her hard work in coordinating this group in the first 1.5 years and really making it happen and setting up all the structures. That was it. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Okay. Great. I'm not gonna comment any further on the age issue. Okay. Excellent. So maybe just to quickly. So we're missing. Sorry, we're missing 2 people still. Sorry, I got completely confused now. So Viviana or Tony? Who wants to go next? Tony, please.
Yeah, I had to jump on while listening to Haliki, and I think, of course, the first thing I want to say, and I want to point it out, I think also because it's an all-woman panel, one of the reasons probably none of us are crossing the time limit. I think it has to do, I mean, I wish it didn't, but I think it has to do something with that. And also the fact that we need to kind of, I see like Haliki needs to comfort or I think this is also something we need to acknowledge. I mean, I especially want to say this because generally also whenever we are trying for a change, there will be people who are, when a system benefits someone, they're not going to give it up willingly. And even if it's academicians who think they are very objective in the analysis of the world, they are often not objective at all in analysis of themselves. And I think this is something, it's harsh, but I mean, of course, this is, I mean, we must say, and this is the case often. So I guess it's okay to say it and not having to apologize or make others comfortable. We are not bound or we are not obliged to make others feel comfortable. And also taking from that point, I would want to focus, I mean, of course, also because how I look, who I am within, when I'm in the degrowth movement, I think I also had this like kind of kneeing in and claim my place in this place, because of course one of the first questions is like, hey, like, what are you doing here again? Like, how do you fit in? And then kind of, then of course, I think the narrative has evolved in last 2 years. I feel that a lot, and I think one of the good things that it's online is, for me, it's also empowering to hear to Isaac Asume, or to this. This time we saw more stronger. For the Global Solidarity panel, that was also when I saw the composition of the panel. I think it was a nice panel, and just generally, I think also in different panels there were more diversity that we could achieve. And just imagine if it were the strategy meeting in Vienna. Yeah. And at the same time, when we talk about white middle class degrowth being white middle class community, I think it's generally not only degrowth. The whole climate movement in Germany, in Europe, is super white middle class. And at the same time, the problem is, no matter, now we are all super anti-racist, right? Because one person was killed by kneeing on their throat. But we are not only racist when somebody kills someone like that way. There are thousands of microaggression that allows for that kind of violent aggression to happen. And I want to also say, question, like, if I say, do you think you could be racist? And if that question makes you uncomfortable, and in your head you're like, no way, I can never be racist, then there's a problem. I think because when we are part of a structure that is fundamentally racist, that if we benefit from that structure, we must be open to the fact that we could have some internalized racism just because the whole structure supports it. So, and it doesn't mean you have to kill someone on the pavement kneeing them to be a racist. You could have so many subtle racism, and that's also one of the reasons. So when do a person of color feel comfortable in a room? And I think one of the discussion I also shared it, I can only give this example to, at least I can make women feel connected to this example when I say, if you're in a room and there are 200 people and you are maybe just 4 people who are non-white, a person of color, a black, indigenous, whoever. So to a white woman, I can connect by saying, imagine being in a room with 200 men and you're just one of the 4 women. How do you feel the tension? And for most women, they can understand what I'm saying. And I can use this example because of this whole power structure of patriarchy in the system, that the woman can connect when I say, how does it feel for a person of color to be in a room, keep claiming spaces and kneeing their way in? But I don't know how I can connect with a man who doesn't have any kind of, with this structure. It's also in this way, their epistemologic disadvantage for the man. I'm sorry, guys, being a white man also comes with some disadvantage. But in this way, this is also the reality. So when we say, as a white dominated movement, what we can do, it's also, we definitely, as you said, but we have to think practically as well. Like in the Leipzig, it was a climate camp, of course, but I think this is where the activists have advantage. We had BIPOC only spaces. We had really prioritizing people to make them feel they're included in the events, in the social events, in the evening events, the music, the kind of music we play. Is it very Westernized music? Is it only the people who grew up? I also grew up with this heavily exposure to this whole Westernized American pop music. So we also know that, right? When I can claim some space, I also have this advantage being able to speak in English. And the way that I can speak in English also means that shapes my thought as well. So when we have all of that reflection as a structure, we should also, it's not only enough to say, oh, we are super white middle class, what can we do? But then we must also actively think, how can I make this space comfortable for other more person of color to come and claim space? For me, the motivation is I want to be there to set an example for others to come and claim the space as well. If others to think, okay, if she's there, maybe I could be there as well. That also kind of gives this headstrong. And that's why I also wanted to say to Haliki that, yeah, for being a woman, of course, it could be intimidating to fight the white male academicians, but at the same time, we have to keep claiming space and we don't have to apologize for that. I'm not going to say sorry to the white people if I made them feel like they could be racist. Then it's actually, I did a favor to you, I would rather say. So, yeah, I don't know how long of my time is, but at this point, I think I would stop here. In terms of way forward, this is something and we need to keep enforcing, and it's not enough. What we are doing better, what I want to say, we are doing better in terms of discussing colonialism. And I still want to talk about the Green New Deal session and this MEP Aura Luluk being there, and there was some cool, but okay, I think probably Viviana would have a really cool content-wise analysis.
Wow, that was a lot of content, Tony, and a fantastic plaidoyer. Very nice, thank you, Viviana. And by the way, you still had a bit of time, so
okay. Maybe the second round.
Yeah, sure, Viviana.
Okay. Let's say that I think that after this conference, we can confirm that there is a multiplicity of strategies within the degrowth movement. This multiplicity is irreducible. And we should not attempt to reduce plurality or to value some strategies like more than others on a general level, irrespectively of contextual conditions. What is needed, I think, and this has just started, is to deepen both the knowledge and the practices of each of those each of these strategies, with sensitivity to specificity of context and of the different actors. From a research experience, for example, in study movement, I can say that some of the strongest transformative innovations I've encountered are exactly those where there is a diversity of ideological positions, which were included into a common view of what had to be changed. So the common vision, I think, is very important. So I'm not in favor of a sort of big tent that demystifies the meaning of degrowth. In one of these transformative innovations that I investigated, which is called Canvadio in Barcelona, there was a division of labor of activism, so to say. For example, the anarchists and autonomous activists were not negotiating with the state authorities, for example, and they left this task to other movement actors that did not reject an engagement with the state. The common and collective project was what mattered, and the fact that it needed to lead to substantive changes in the neighborhood. This is intimately connected also with the necessity of an intersectional struggle, as already been said, and also an intersectional composition, able to include feminist concerns over social reproduction and priorities with decolonial, just transition concerns, migrant rights, and so on. But how do we define strategy? Social movement scholars have defined it as a plan of collective action intended to accomplish goals within a particular context. So strategy entails defining, interpreting, communicating, and implementing a plan of collective action that is believed to be a promising way to achieve a desired alternative future in light of circumstances. However, this is a multi-level process, as plans of action, context, and goals can be distinguished based on the level of social aggregation, like micro, meso, and macro, type of institution, geographic scope, duration, like short-term, long-term, cultural and structural characteristics, and multiple strategies can be in place in the same movement. I will differentiate here between two forms of strategies, an internal and related to the movement building, and an external one. And the two, of course, are connected, and we can go into that. I think that some strategies which were discussed here at the conference, or at least mentioned, were particularly important. With regards to the internal forms of strategy, such as movement building, the important issues of improving our own internal organization was posed, for example, by Andro Rilovic and Ulrich Brandt, with regards to increasing the network coordination of the different degrowth groups. I'm referring here to those that are the most prominent at the international level, but it would also be good to involve other degrowth groups at national levels, which have up to now been less internationally visible, now so to say. So as to establish on a regular basis coordinated space for reflection, exchange of information on our own struggles, activities, and obstacles encountered. The open letter is a very good example of this coordination. As mentioned by some people, by several people, organization does not need necessarily to be a formalized organization or hierarchy. This can also be horizontal, informal networks of groups, of course. And related to the external forms of struggle, I think an important strategy is the cultural work and dissemination of degrowth through both alternative and mainstream media in order to have an impact on the public opinion. This is a fundamental aspect that cannot be understated, I think. This does not only relate to the discourse on degrowth on an abstract level, so to say. So on this aspect, actually, the degrowth movement has been achieving important outcomes, but also on the concrete struggles, like, for example, social-environmental conflicts against big fossil infrastructure projects, where we can exert some meaningful influence, providing the overarching vision to activist struggles that sometimes are missing, together with a broader critique of development model. Here, for example, Paola Laini and myself presented a work in progress, although with some technical difficulties here at the conference, on the not-up movement in the south of Italy against a gas pipeline. The movement outcome was hindered by the absence of a more radical critique of development and of a credible development alternative, in its discourse, and by the lack of real freedom of press, which legitimated the discourses produced on the part of institutional and corporate actors. This is, of course, also related to the issue of building meaningful coalitions with other movements and struggles, following the intersectional criteria mentioned previously. Then, and this also relates to the movement culture, as mentioned previously, I think there are the so-called interstitial transformation, which is another important strategy. Not only they are really valuable in and of themselves, but they are paramount for a degrowth transformation because they allow to further develop activist radical imaginaries and build and embody other forms of life and alternative futures. In other words, these initiatives pose the question of a different ontological politics, as also Margara Millan reminded us yesterday in a very nice session. This is important because we cannot just affirmatively aim at downscaling. We need a different ontological politics and alternative value practices that allow us to prefigure a different society. What we need to develop more is how the symbiotic types of transformation, the so-called non-reformist reforms I was mentioning before, that can be nourished by interstitial transformation through forms of knowledge co-production between movements and state actors, starting from the local level, I think. So, but what about these non-reformist reforms? Stefania Barca reminded us of the importance of having a plan ready, and this proved indeed important for the rise of neoliberalism, as David Harvey explained. Some important policies that have been mentioned are selective deglobalization, the commodification of main economic sectors, and stopping the expansionary growth and profit-oriented logics existing in various sectors, from food, where the common agricultural policy privileges big agribusiness, to housing, where we should stop building new housing stock, but rather occupy the empty housing stock, and provide affordable, high-quality food and housing to all. But how can this be achieved? This clearly requires putting public ownership at the center. With public ownership, here I follow the conception of people such as Andrew Cumbers and others that encompass, this definition encompass all those attempts, both outside and through the state, that reclaim economic space from capitalist social relations, or else all those collective ownership subject to collective forms of decision-making, including commons. As several panelists, for example, Andreas Novi, Tom Smith, Nida Inkerman, and Frank Adler, rightly warned us, we need changes in people's conditions of everyday life. We need alternative modes of satisfying needs, shifting to a socio-ecological infrastructure affordable for all and sustainable, centered upon the decommodification of social provisioning, from housing to health, food, energy, that is, all those sectors that are associated with basic needs. One important non-reformist reform that has been mentioned also, but I think needs more profound treatment, is the democratization of the state. The transformation of at least some public institutions into institutions of the common, as Dardot and Laval have explained in their book on commons, including academia, actually, which obeys commodification and productivist logics. This is, I think, also, at least in part, linked to what Miriam Lang referred to when she talked about institutionalization from below. This would maybe provide a new meaning to the ruptural strategy of Eric Conley Wright, which had to do with the so-called Leninist strategies of taking state power. While I completely agree with the argument by Miriam Lang on the challenge of keeping movement struggles alive once social movements go to the government level, I think we should not completely abandon the ruptural strategy of taking state power, but probably revise it by ensuring at the same time a democratization of the state, which can only occur with the strength of social mobilizations and movements. Then I would like to end with a final point with a central question that I think needs much more discussion and research in Degrowth. How do we bring about those radical reforms? What are the social and political processes that allow these non-reformist reforms to be brought forward? What can we make, can we make different radical imaginaries hegemonic so that degrowth policies can be accepted by vast sections of population, despite the fact that this will go against, we know, entrenched and vested interests with power to influence the current common senses, to put it with Gramsci, that is the hegemonic ways of living and understanding the world. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Viviana. Thanks a lot. Because you got a few more minutes because where there was a misunderstanding when we arranged the session, and that's fine. I think this was a very nice account. Also, Tom said we can overdraw a little bit, which is nice. And really great. Thanks a lot to all your comments here. I have maybe a question also that you might address in the second round, and this is my personal question here in regards to what I take from all of you in a way is this call for more inclusiveness of the movement, and not forgetting disenprivileged people, not making the barrier to entry too difficult, reaching out to people by using different concepts or words, like Nena was saying. And I'm just wondering, of course, I agree very much. I've just one concern here. How is, where do you, or how do you deal with the problem of co-optation then? And what do you do with, how inclusive are you in reaching out? Are you just reaching out to peasants in the global south, or are you actually trying to reach out also to the people in power? And to what extent are you then willing to compromise? Also, this in reference to what Haliki also said, in that we cannot always be perfect, and so we need to make compromises at times. But then we always, of course, face the danger of being co-opted, or also of having things watered down a lot. So this I see as a challenge, and maybe you can somehow also include that in your the question we have for the second round, and that is the COVID-19 question that we of course have to deal with and ask. There were some sessions especially dedicated to that topic in this conference. But what do you think is does the movement have to take care of in this post-COVID era? What is what strategic advantages do we have here? What can the degrowth agenda be here in this post-corona world, especially for using also this crisis to advance the degrowth agenda? I mean, one of the few sessions I attended was one of the very first ones where Matthias he reminded us, or his argument was that we should be much more effective in using this crisis in advancing a degrowth agenda. So we shouldn't be so defensive in saying this is not what happened here, is not degrowth, and so on. Okay, so what are your thoughts here? And again, I would leave it up to you. I would only ask Viviana maybe to keep it a bit shorter, just to keep the speakers balance. And whoever wants to go first?
Well, Haliki should go before me, so I don't say what she wanted to say, right?
Yes. So Haliki, why don't you go first?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm very exhausted, so I'm a little bit slow, but I will try to get my thoughts in order. I think a lot of really good things, some of which I probably missed, were said during the conference already on how the corona crisis unites people, and from the very obvious, for example, on realizing that the real economy is based on care, right? It's based on care and nature, and everything, nothing collapsed when the finance guys couldn't go to work, but it would have collapsed if nurses and doctors didn't go to work, right? So that's one thing that I think was mentioned quite a lot, and also uniting people and kind of thinking about the meaning of life a bit more as well, and working time reduction and care work and all of these things. But I think I don't have anything specific to add to that, but just, yeah, kind of repeating all the really good things that were already said. And now Nena can take it away and say the same thing in a much more eloquent and beautiful way. Nena, there you go. And extra things also.
Okay. I think you put things very well, Haliki. Yeah, okay, just for me finding my notes. Yeah, we had our book presentation on Friday morning, and one thing that Taju, a long-standing climate activist, said is that the climate justice claim is always, we shut shit down, but actually it's them, they shut shit down. And now that a lot of shit is shut down, we should keep it shut down. And I think that's a very interesting point to take, right? How do we keep all these things shut down, and how do we ally up to do this? And I think that brings me back to my favorite topic of today, which is building big movement. And how do we bring people from different strands together? And so I know that in very many places, people now try to find ways to protest against the way the crisis should be handled, right? So we now see what is in the center of our economy, which should be in the center. We realize that if we actually don't keep the economy running, we can curb climate change somehow. We can flatten the curve of climate change maybe. And we see what kind of effort we have to make in order to satisfy our needs, but also what we don't need for it. And I think that's a very good point in order to intervene and say, look, we all see it. And I don't know if that should be under the term degrowth, but it should be in any case under the perspective of changing the economy in a way that we shut shit down, which we don't want. And in Germany, we are currently trying to coordinate with a lot of players, so social movements from different strands, but also like unions and environmental NGOs and those in anti-racist struggles and for human rights. And we try to coordinate our activities so that we can push for social-ecological transformation. And one of the big struggles in there is that we don't know yet how easily we can get big crowds of people on the streets again due to the measures that are still in place. And I don't know what it's like in other countries, to be honest. I think it's not as bad as in Germany in many places, that the biggest demonstrations for now have been by people who rather want to go back to what has been before. And they don't say, yeah, it was, a lot of things were bad and we have to find new ways, but they say we should go back because that was a good term of society. And they're very closely linked to right-wing movements. And so I think we have to make a lot of effort to coordinate in the coming months and to try to bring people to the streets to reinforce our demands. Yeah, I think that's what we can take from Corona. And I have another thing to say about degrowth activities, but I can keep that to the next round. You tell me, Christian.
Say that again, sorry. I was busy reading the questions.
I wanted to share something else that I have about the coordination of degrowth activities. I can either say that now or say it later.
That's okay. Whatever you prefer. Yeah.
Okay, let's stick to Corona then, and I'll say it later if we have the time. Yeah.
Super. Tony, you ready?
I will connect the question to to take chance on this point where I wanted to reflect about how the movement, I think, within the climate movement, I mean, we see there are a lot of discussion, but also when we look for alternative policy suggestion, there isn't much, or how to say, like, we can really, the degrowth can really take this momentum and put suggestion in there to, and this was, I think this is also somehow our momentum even before COVID-19 within the whole climate movement. And in my experience, what I've also seen that a lot of the within the Fridays for Future or the Extinction Rebellion, even in the mainstream climate movement, because the mainstream has shifted now, right? So, and then there's a lot of interest also towards this whole degrowth suggestion and what does degrowth really mean? And that point, I felt sometimes maybe we are not completely prepared yet in terms of we have some, I mean, of course, yeah, there would be people who'd be angry at me probably saying this, but even within the analysis of discussion around Green New Deal, how the degrowth proposals are fundamentally different than the green growth in terms of the green growth. And saying to putting forward, I think this is where we have the chance to, again, if we think generally in terms of the countries that are in the global south, have a lot of us would agree in the systemic analysis, and based on that systemic analysis, we agree on the fact that the countries, so that allows or supports this imperial way of living, or this whole big way of life for some countries in the world or the global north. That also means in turn that the governance sometimes often are fragile in many parts, or in that way that the ability of the governments to support people in times of crisis is also limited. So, and how the lobbying power and the people power is also very plays out differently for the countries in the periphery and the center. So having all of that in mind, so then for degrowth, when we put forward proposals in terms of reduction of work hour, or moving away for central or circular economy, or even localized economies from a degrowth perspective, it's important to also, again, I would be repeating myself, but it would be important to put at the center the whole colonial perspective, because what policies gets taken here has a far-reaching ripple effect for the other parts of the world. And in this way, I think we haven't done well enough yet. And so, yeah, so this was my position in terms of then, so this was the generally before COVID-19 regarding the whole policy, moving away from how we could shift our carbon footprint and change. And in light of COVID-19, again, we also see what COVID puts a different kind of challenge for countries in global south. It's not only for them shutting down the economy literally means because of this huge size of informal economy. It really means a large number of people within a day's, people cannot really afford to stay home. It's a quarantine. People would die before hunger, then COVID kills them. So it is the reality. For a case of Bangladesh, that's a huge challenge for from the specific case I know. And also, I mean, if you followed the scenarios in India or different parts. So within that light, what would then this mean? And that would then create this whole discussion also for this. So one of the discussion in the panel, one of the panels also talked about within this slide, there is still this debt that these countries in the global south have to repay, and that could go back in 21, 22. And this is where we also have the space to push forward this whole global debt cancellation and reparation, but from a different light, and also within a much more empowered way. And that's also the power of degrowth narrative, right? Like we change this whole, oh, I give you money because we are so nice and big and we are developed. We have done the things right way and you should learn. So I'm a big brother giving you money, but changing that narrative and being really the responsibility and taking it as a responsibility to pay back. I think this is where we have the strengths or the strategic point we could have pushed, or we can still push in the mainstream movement parts, which would still probably be a challenge because also, of course, the mainstream movements also have a lot of structural privileges. But I think that would be my position in terms of this pre-COVID-19, but also in light of COVID-19 with this North-South and the policy suggestions that you could push forward.
Okay, super. Just Viviana, you left, and with a short intervention, please, of your COVID-19 strategy.
Okay, will be very short. I will try to be very short. I think a lot of many interesting things have been said on the Corona crisis, how the pandemic issues, on the pandemic issues. No? So I won't repeat myself. I won't repeat those things. But I think something that maybe has not been, I think that we should exploit more in the degrowth movement is, first of all, to clearly denounce how this pandemic is tightly linked, on the one hand, with the destruction and exploitation of natural habitats, as studies such as that one from Rob Wallace have showed, but also that it is affecting differently socioeconomic strata. So there has been this Harvard analysis led by Professor Francesca Dominici, who showed a statistical link between COVID-19 death and other diseases associated with long-term exposure to some particular matter. This study was conducted at the US level, and basically it showed higher levels of particulate matter in air were associated with higher death rates from the disease. Also, the study showed that communities of color are disproportionately impacted by air pollutants and therefore are more likely to face a pollution burden. This put to the fore again the issue of environmental justice. So there are some other studies also conducted in Italy that have proven a similar thing, and there is even the possibility, the hypothesis that actually the virus can, the virus was actually found to be attached to the particulate matter. So it could be, but this is not completely definitely proven, that the more actually polluted a region is, and the more the virus is going to spread. And I think it's not a coincidence. I'm not like a natural scientist, but probably it's not a coincidence in this sense that actually the region most affected in Italy is the most polluted actually region in Italy. So I think this is something that the degrowth movement can better use, let's say. And so I will just stay with this one element because, as I said, many other things have been said on the pandemic crisis, which were already quite valuable. So I don't want to add any other things.
Okay, thanks a lot, Viviana. Very interesting study. I've also seen that. Was actually sent to me by one of my students. Very interesting. And so we now really come to the last part, which is the question and answer session. We have a few questions in the chat. I will just summarize them more or less, so you can weave them into your closing statement. I will also have one myself to you, which I will say at the end. The one question was again about the naming issue. This is a long discussion we had in the movement already. Is degrowth a good word for it? And because of is something negative and so on. Nena mentioned it briefly, so it's up to you how far you want to go into it again. Another more questions also about how we actually can bring these movements together, real strategies of how to bring environmental justice movements, other movements together with the degrowth movement and so on. And one question was also if you would suggest to actually, if you see the online format as something that the degrowth community and movement should exploit in the future even more. Or more, let's say. Maybe just a few cents, my 5 cents also to the naming debate, because I've also made some comments here in the past. One interesting thing that I found with this is that in publications that we've produced, people start using the word degrowth society in a completely detached way from its original meaning, and I think this is a linguistic transformation that can happen where the actual negative of the word doesn't really come into play. I mean, for many people, the negative doesn't so much imply anyway, because they speak different languages. Apart from that, I agree, of course, that for some people the TH is not the best thing to say, not the best thing to pronounce. And additional question from me also, when I was reading the questions that the organizing team kindly gave to me to post to you, there was this question about that now with this conference we are moving away from the what and moving to the how. This is what we should do. Here I immediately questioned myself whether will this actually be the case? Will we ever be able to move away from the what? Like, what is the situation? What is the situation? What do we not like about the situation? Of course, this sounds nice because it sounds like we are moving now towards creating what we want. But I also think that we will probably never really move away from the what. We will have continuously got to recheck of what the situation is that we don't like. We have to analyze it and look at it and realize it, and realize what the things that happen and point out what we don't like. But I would also like to hear your voice on that. Like, would you see our main emphasis really now going to the how and on to concrete strategies, or is the what still for you a relevant area of interest? And this, please, together with your closing statement already. So I will give you the sign with my fingers, but Thomas will tell me how many minutes each one of you has. It's somewhere between 2 and 3. Who would like to start again? I can also nominate if it's quicker. Tony, I've got you in the top right.
Just picking up from your question, I think it's a continuous process, right? It will never be we completely are done with what and then we move to how. But I think also as a movement and also the situation, how things are evolving with this, I mean, of course, what we represent as a movement and the fact that the world is kind of falling apart and there are millions and more people on the streets. So I think we definitely, in terms of how is something that we should be needing to focusing on, and at the same time the what is also something that we need to be able to put forward more and more to have a more collective imaginary to shift the imaginary or share our vision within more people to really be able to reach there and achieve, right? So for that, I think, yeah, so and in terms of we as community, I think quite a lot of us, we do have some defined vision and we have a lot of nice examples that we can really try to do more, and maybe this will be a learning process where we, so we engage and we shape also the what when we explore how. I think that is my understanding or position regarding this question. And what was the second thing that you asked?
That I asked. Okay, a second question was about how the movements, how strategies to bring them together.
That I think is a
about
very
the naming, if you want, about the if degrowth is a good a good word in itself. Sorry.
I mean, this also in the past I have a different opinion than most others in terms of degrowth. I think it's kind of it's provocating, and somehow that also helps. Like it helps to take the idea of growth in its head and flip it around and kind of course we make clear that it's not about we want to reduce things, and that kind of, I think it opens up discussion and engages, but at the same time I also agree when quite a lot of us says that, but it also makes the policy discussion difficult or the politicians gets afraid. But what I also want to share, like that I think even then within the current context of the world, there are still doors opening where the politicians are asking us, what do you have? Do you have suggestions for us? Or even with the Brussels conference, there were really this whole European Union hosting this post-growth. So I think for me personally, with degrowth, and also of course because we have different terms for different areas and regions, I like it because it opens exactly the controversy and kind of allows us to open a box of discussion.
Okay, thanks. Thomas just reminded me to be stricter now with the last ones, but Tony, you had some minutes extra. Aliki, would you not like to go next?
Yeah, in terms of going forward, I hope that just on a small scale here in Vienna, that we will continue to bring together different movements. So the Austrian Trade Union Federation, for example, supported the conference, and we continue to work on bringing together different movements and furthering degrowth somehow. That's all I can say for now. Let's see how we do that. First, a little break after this conference, I think.
Okay, excellent. I see Nena would prefer to go last. Viviana, can you go next? Unmute your microphone.
Sorry. Regarding the first question, I completely agree with what Tony said, actually. I think the what and the what should continue to be scrutinized, let's say, and it's definitely linked to the how question. No? So the what is basically what this degrowth future will be, and the how question, how to get it, is in really intimately linked with the what question. And this is something that you can figure out the what the more you go, no? As the Zapatista said, I think caminando avanzamos, or So like the more we advance, you know, like the more also, so by questioning, basically we can basically also kind of imagine the future we want, you know, in the way we are advancing. And related to the second question, to the degrowth question, yes, of course, I also agree that the degrowth was meant to be a sort of missile war. You know, this is what actually we can find in the literature now. So the fact that you were actually breaking with an established, let's say, hegemonic imaginary, no? So that's why the word was chosen. But we should really be always, we know that degrowth is not simply the negative of growth. So degrowth is something is about something different. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Thank you.
Super, thanks. Nena, please.
Yeah, about the term degrowth. So I agree, it's a good missile word. And I think it's also fine if politicians get afraid. I'm just afraid that allies get afraid and that we scare off the unions and the environmental movements and people anti-racist struggles. And so I'm just looking for words that could combine more people. As for the how and the what, I think it's intrinsically linked. You can never do what or how, it's always both. And I think that what we discussed on the panel on discussing power structure, it's important who speaks here, and how we engage with each other, that's part of the how, and I think it's always linked. And I think we can advance as persons, as individuals, and as little groups, but as the whole movement, it always should be both, from my point of view. And I wanted to go last because I wanted to say something about the coordination of Degrowth International. That's a little bit detached, and also maybe it's a nice announcement to make. So we had 2 workshops today with different degrowth players, so degrowth.info, degrowth.net, research in degrowth, the support group, people from different countries working on different degrowth issues. And we realized that we all work on similar things and we coordinate, but we don't coordinate as well as we would like to coordinate. And often we also coordinate spontaneously. So like, for example, there was this open letter and a lot of people coordinated, but then this is no further structure. And we had the impression today that maybe time has come for the degrowth coordination on an international level, that is really a degrowth international coordination, that is not the support group or degrowth.info or whatever body you know. And well, we had only 2 sessions today, so we haven't figured out how we do it yet. Obviously with representatives from different groups and people who are in it. But I really think this is something to take forward, to do better international coordination. And I really hope we find a way to do it. And yeah, stay tuned on how we do it on degrowth.info or degrowth.net. And I also, since it's the closing panel of the conferences and you seem to be very inspired, a lot of people had a lot of fun and good conversations, all that, I hope you stick with us. And people said, oh, I'm happy to be part of the Degrowth family. I'm happy you're part of the family, and I hope you stay on. And yeah, try to bring degrowth to new networks, try to bring other people in, connect to others, find your way to live degrowth, and I hope we see each other again.
Thanks a lot, Nena. Thanks. That means that that cuts down time on my closing statement. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. So now we move to a very different point, and this point was added to the agenda very last minute. And I would like to pass on to Haliki, who will read out a solidarity statement that has been developed or has been put together very quickly inside the organizing team and other people from the conference participants. Haliki, can you please read it out to us?
Yeah, are you guys ready also? Yeah, okay. So this is a statement from, I'm reading it out on behalf of the organizing team and the participants. So, solidarity statement with Black Lives Matter. We, organizers and participants at the Degrowth Vienna 2020 conference, demand equity and justice. We stand in solidarity with the people in the United States challenging white supremacist culture and with related global struggles. As activists, academics, artists, and practitioners, we aim together to put an end to systemic oppression and structural racism, as again has been recently revealed by the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. The conference expresses its global solidarity with all victims of police violence and systemic racism, and supports the anti-fascist movements facing criminalization. Racism and coercion are political issues that cannot be tackled on a moral basis only. These murders are the result of an oppressive and exploitative system where racism and coercion are key in maintaining domination and the exploitation of women, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, and historically marginalized trans, queer, non-binary people, people with disabilities, the working class, and natures. Ending systemic racism is a liberatory means towards human emancipation. This requires the rejection of a policing system based on the devalorization of human beings, as well as the destruction of nature for the sake of capital accumulation through a white supremacist culture by political and economic elites. Overcoming systemic racism includes the rejection of the prison industrial complex, reinforcing capitalist exploitation by criminalizing lives. It additionally calls for a transformation of the organization of executive functions away from oppression and instead centered on the protection of human rights. We recognize that degrowth as a movement in Europe is still white dominated and thus susceptible to the same structural discrimination that plagues our systems. We commit to work consciously as a community to address and improve in regards to racism internally. As a movement, we fight for a world where every human and non-human being of any color, gender, any sex and/or sexual orientation, any ableness, no matter of their geographic or social origins, beliefs, or opinions, is entitled to dignity and to a meaningful and decent life. Thus, the degrowth movement fully embraces the claims of the protesters throughout the United States and beyond, and expresses its support. With the awareness that our paths are still detached, we aim to advance our convergence and struggle forth in unity. Christian?
Sorry. Okay, we have to go very quick. I thought, Haliki, you would keep up that sign. Okay, yeah. Very final announcement. Thank you very much, Haliki. Final announcement, please keep tuned, check out the graphic recordings, continue the discussion in the Discord channel. Thank you very much to everybody, to the organizers and all participants who made this such a wonderful event. And now I think we can also clap as the panelists here. And please stay tuned for the closing video that the organizing team prepared. Okay, I think we should clap. We should hear some clapping at the conference, no? So now the video, please.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Oh.
Thanks for everyone joining us in our conference and sharing the special experience with us. We hope you enjoyed it.
The Degrowth conference organizing process means for us becoming part of a wonderful community.
And working together with a bunch of motivated, appreciative and creative people to make something incredible possible. Thank you so much for this, and bye-bye.
Hey everyone, we're Hannah and Nadi from the awareness team.
In the beginning, we didn't know at all what to expect from doing awareness work in a digital context. But while preparing for the conference, we learned how important it actually is to also in virtual spaces take care of each other's well-being and make sure no one is left alone with uncomfortable situations.
We're overwhelmed by all the vivid discussions which took place on the various channels. Thank you so much for treating each other respectfully.
Stay aware.
Hey, I'm Lena.
Hey, and I'm Daniel.
We are really happy that we have been part of this amazing process of organizing this conference.
We met so many great new people and learned so many new skills, and it was a pleasure to contribute to the Degrowth movement.
And now it's almost sad that it's over, but we're also really happy that it's over, since it was quite an intense but amazing process. Ciao!
What a ride, and what a beautiful, beautiful destination. Thanks to everyone who contributed to that with their thoughts, their energies, their time. Thank you for becoming part of a bigger idea. Spread the message and take care.
Hi everyone. So I hope you enjoyed this conference as much as we enjoyed doing it. Yeah, thanks for becoming a part of the Tgrowth Vienna 2020 conference. Cheers.
Thank you for the bountiful harvest. Take care and goodbye.
Hey everyone, just a big thank you to the whole Orga team. Organizing this was really fun. And also a big thank you to the whole IT volunteers for helping us and supporting us. It was great and all the best. Thank you.
Hi all.
All the best, everyone.
Big
Thank you to the whole Orga team.
Big thanks to everyone who was involved. Really appreciate this. The last 4 days, months, years have been amazing. Bye.
Hello, this is Agnes from the organizing team. I just want to say that it's great to see all the beautiful people coming together on this platform, and you really can feel the connection. Thank you.
Degrowth Vienna 2020, eine Wahnsinnskonferenz. Ich bin jetzt total erschöpft. Ein Riesendanke von mir an das Team. Wir haben das richtig gut gemacht. Vielen Dank euch.
I'm really thankful for the small part I was able to contribute to this amazing conference, to this incredibly professional, engaged, motivated and loving team. Thank you very much for making this happen.
I'm really glad that I joined this wonderful Orga team, although I was kind of late, and I don't want to say goodbye tonight, because I hope it was just the beginning.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for participating in this conference. I'm totally overwhelmed with how many great people participated in it.
Hey everybody, thanks for attending the first online Degrowth conference. I loved the organizing process for the chance to meet so many amazing people.
Okay, my closing words. It's a quote that's very dear to me, and I think it fits the conference, the organizational aspect, but also the content. It goes like this. Total rationality shall never win. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us and hope you had an interesting 4 days. See you later.
Dear participants, we are Alejandra, Tom and Vivi from the organizing team. We have gathered online during the last 4 days. The aim was to consider the role of strategy for a degrowth transformation and to give space for reflecting, exchanging and developing strategies with scholars, practitioners, artists and activists. These strategies are crucial for going towards our visions of a degrowth future of life abundance. Talking about abundance, we feel especially grateful for the abundance of presenters, viewers, volunteers and organizers who made this a successful experiment of online conferencing. A great team of moderators and rich discussions and more than 35 IT volunteers from different backgrounds and in different places supported over 100 sessions with more than 400 presenters. Wow! We want to use this moment to say thank you to all of you who supported the conference with your work and your love for the idea of degrowth.
And as you all know, truth can only be found in numbers. So let's do some counting. We painted one image, which is Degrowth. We have worked for over 2 years on the conference. We are supported by 16 co-hosts, such as universities in Vienna or the Chamber of Labor, 6 supporting organizations, such as the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and 8 media partners, such as Südwien, Mosaic Blog, or Unter Palmen, to which we are deeply thankful. We can rely on an amazing organizing team with over 35 people. And we had a deeply inspiring advisory board that consists of over 46 academics and representatives of different organizations. We also had 1,284 attendees in the opening panel. There were also 4,114 registrations overall. And finally, we wrote more than 45,309 emails.
Thank you, Alejandra. Wow, but I wonder, what else did we do apart of writing emails? Our major panels were dedicated to strategies and touched upon different issues. We inquired into why strategies are needed and into their role in past transformations. For example, did we look at past and present struggles of workers' unions or Austrian environmental movements? We also invited activists and practitioners to share how they have developed strategies in different areas of society. And we discussed food, mobility, housing, trade, as well as financial or monetary systems. We could experience how these discussions enrich our own understanding of change, so that we can now better understand our role and our agency within the bigger process of transformation. There have been debates, discussions, new ideas, emotions, experiences, and reflections, which all shape the pathways on which we set out to implement transformation. A world that envisions life where nature and humanity interact in a more harmoniously way, while honoring the limits of our planet and humanity. We invite you to apply what we have discussed. We know what has to be done. It depends on us now to shape our reality and to implement our learnings.
Now we will take some time to regenerate. With fresh energy, the organizing team will start a collaborative writing process to digest, synthesize, and build on the contributions from the last 4 days. We will also ask you for your contribution, so stay tuned. By the end of this year, we are also planning an offline gathering here in Vienna, so keep your eyes open for our event. 2021 will be an exciting year for Degrowth fans. We want to invite you to the Manchester conference, Building Alternative Livelihoods in Times of Ecological and Political Crisis, which will take place in July next year. A month later, in August, the conference on Degrowth for ecological sustainability and social equity will take place in The Hague. The Manchester team is also organizing an online symposium in September on the implications of the COVID-19 for ecological economics and degrowth. But even sooner is the International Degrowth Day on June 6th. Many local projects and actions are already planned. Maybe the conference even inspired you and your community to bring into reality what is in your mind and heart for a social ecological transformation. We hope to watch many little seedlings grow, where this conference has sown its seeds. Seeds that are already containing everything that is needed for this transformation. And we ask you, what will we see sprouting? A gathering, a conversation, a new project or initiative, research, experiment, an adventure, or a creative happening in your neighborhood. We are curious and excited to hear of your creations at upcoming gatherings.
Lastly, the Vienna organizing team has also a request to you out there. Please help us with continuing to be a sustainable degrowth organization beyond this conference as an active force for degrowth in Austria. find out our bank details for donations on our website, www.degrowthvienna2020.org, and here in the chat channel. This conference has made clear that strong and well-organized local groups struggling for degrowth are a key part of a long-term strategy for transformation. Your financial support will increase our viability and reach long after this conference. Let's start working towards a social-ecological transformation by respecting humanity, our natural environment, and animal species without destroying the earth or harming others. Let us be creative, imagining a world where there is harmony between all beings and within ourselves. Let's start working towards a social ecological transformation by respecting humanity, our natural environment, and animal species without destroying the earth or harming others. Let us be creative, imagining a world where there is harmony between all beings and within ourselves. Let us work together to build collective and powerful experiences and agency for a social ecological transformation towards Degrowth. Especially the COVID crisis showed us clearly how vital simple social activities are for human beings. Things like walking freely in the street, meeting friends, being together, to talk, to eat, or even to dance together. Let us look forward with optimism, faith, and cherish these simple things. But also, let us be critical and self-reflective as a movement. A degrowth transformation will not happen easily or without a struggle. It is time that we put the question of the how at the center of our actions and work together to collectively define and shape this path forward. And now, we want to invite you to step onto this path in reality. So, turn off your computer and see you at our next gathering in person at the end of this year in Vienna. Thank you all for being with us.